Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Tom Worth Jr. and today we have some good news. None of the polling nonsense that people have been so mired in lately. What I wanted to talk about today is just I guess Americans being Americans, and we're getting tight. We're 3 weeks from today, and it would be kind of unfathomable for Trump to win in 3 weeks. I mean, America realized its mistake after 2016, myself included. I realized it kind of immediately, like in the days after the election, when I started reading the reactions from around the country and around the world and realizing that, did I do the right thing when I voted for Trump? And then I started seeing what he instantly started saying he was going to do as soon as he took office, and how he had no transition plan and hadn't even given any thought to who his cabinet might be and his administration, because they had no idea that they would actually win. Then I realized, okay, this is not going to be good. And then we had 4 years of just way worse than anyone could have ever imagined. And we kicked him out, by millions of votes. And that was great. And many of us thought that was the end of it. And it wasn't. We had all the election overturning nonsense for the next couple months. We had the Capitol insurrection to top it all off. And 4 years later, here we are again. So how could we ever go back? We can't, I don't think. And I know that I have some seemingly misplaced confidence, but I do want to talk about some numbers today, not polls, although she is still ahead in some polls, legitimate polls, not Republican-funded polls, but actual numbers of voting that has happened. As many of you know, I don't put any stock in these polls, even though she is ahead in them. I put stock in what is actually going on in the world, in America, in our lives, and then in actual ballots that have been cast. We do know things about ballots that have been cast in certain states and nationally. There have been over 5 million early voting ballots cast, either by mail-in or in-person early voting. We don't know who they voted for, but we do know some things about these ballots that have been cast. But before I get to that, just a reminder, yesterday the stock market, the S&P 500, did hit another record. The stock market is at record highs. This is something Donald Trump always prided himself on, is a booming stock market. Well, Biden and Harris, for all their ineptitude, for all they're going to drive America into the ground, check your 401k if you have one. It hit a record yesterday. The S&P 500 did. Down a tiny bit today, but it fluctuates daily, but it is at a record. Inflation, I keep hammering on this. We are at 2 to 2.5% inflation. That's year over year. It's not over the course of a month. We're not 2% higher now than we were a month ago. We're 2 to 2.5% higher than 12 months ago on CPI, the Consumer Price Index. That's what it was in Donald Trump's last few months before COVID hit. And that is a fact. That is the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And inflation has been under control for so many months now that the Fed actually lowered interest rates for the first time in a few years last month. So you've got no inflation to speak of, just completely normal 2 to 2.5% year over year inflation. You've got a record stock market. You have near full employment. We don't have full employment. You never will. But job market is not a problem right now. I honestly don't know why people think that this is a close race. Those are the things that Trump runs on. He runs on low inflation, which we have, and he runs on a high stock market, which we have. Now, I do know there are a lot of fans out there of his tax cuts for corporations, which aren't human beings, and his tax cuts for wealthy people, the top 1%, really the top 1 to 5%. So, and 95% of you, by virtue of math, are not in the top 5%. And I know you have generous hearts, and you want those rich people to get more tax cuts at your expense, which is what his plan does. This is what Goldman Sachs does. This is what economic analysts say. But and to run up the national debt by another several trillion, which is what his plans will do. You've got a lot of fans of that out there. I'm not one. I'm thinking of not only myself, but of my children and my grandchildren, not to be stuck like Donald Trump's businesses, taking every dime they make and using it to pay off interest rates, or to not pay it off at all. But let's get into a few numbers here. And as I said, these are not polls. And polls can mean anything. Some of these widely cited polls, even the legitimate polls, I saw an NBC News poll with Harris ahead, but it's 1,000 voters. And it's not even likely voters. Recall my video from Friday over the kind of stringent definitions of likely voters for these polls. Well, I don't know if NBC News has given up or what, but they're not even doing likely voters. They're just doing registered voters. Just a flat out registered voter. And I guess it doesn't even matter if you're likely to go to the polls or not, or if you voted before, or if you know where your precinct is. It's just you're a registered voter. And I don't have the breakdowns of how many were registered Republican, how many were registered Democrat. That's not in the polling information. I'm not looking at polls. Even though it is good news for Harris, that's ridiculous. What we can look at are people who have already cast an early vote. And what we know about those people is if they're a registered Democrat, if they're a registered Republican, or if they're independent/other. Because many states require you to say that when you request your early mail-in ballots. So those are numbers that we have. We don't know who they're actually voting for. We do know there's a tremendous groundswell of Republicans for Kamala Harris. There is no groundswell of Democrats for Donald Trump. That is a non-existent cohort. So these are worst case numbers. You have to keep in mind that a lot of registered Republicans, I was a Republican my whole life, but I've voted Democrat since 2018. Liz Cheney, I promise you, is not now a registered Democrat, nor is her dad, nor are any of the just innumerable Republicans who are coming out against Trump. They're not Democrats, and they are loudly saying, look, I'm not a Democrat. Donald Trump is a threat. He's not a Republican. So I, as a Republican, have no problem voting against the threat to this country. They are registered Republicans. So if they request early voting ballots, they would go in the registered Republican bucket here. But they're not voting for Trump. So things like this give me some hope. The mail-in absentee ballots requested by party, this was updated this morning on October 15th. And I looked at Pennsylvania and I looked at North Carolina, because those are two battleground states that require you to say which party you're registered with. North Carolina was only 6% Democrat and 4% Republican. That's meaningless. I include it here because it is a battleground. But Pennsylvania, the one we all think about, is 26% Democrat and 13% Republican. Twice as many registered Democrats as registered Republicans have requested absentee ballots in Pennsylvania. The better source of information, a more complete source, was on NBC News, and that was updated at 10:15 this morning Central Time. There are 5.1 million mail-in and early voting in-person votes already cast. We don't know who they voted for, but 5 million have been cast. In registration by party, that is 51% were registered Democrats, 33% were registered Republicans, 16% were registered other. And we know a lot of those Republicans are going to vote Democrat in this election. In Pennsylvania, that breakdown is 69% registered Democrats, 23% registered Republican, 8% other. So more than 3-1 for Democrat over Republican, and actual votes cast by registered Democrats over registered Republicans in Pennsylvania. Now, they actually list for Pennsylvania mail-in requested, and this is another thing I hammer on, is in these polls, which this is not a poll, this is actual votes cast, that people saying they're going to vote doesn't mean they're going to vote. And I'm giving Democrats a lot more credit to turn out than I am Trump voters. I mean, I infer certain things from Trump voters based on comments, based on who their spokespeople are in the media, campaign spokespeople, speakers I have seen myself, Trump himself. I just don't see the turnout for a lot of those people actually getting up and going to the polls. But Pennsylvania mail-in requests were 61 to 28 Democrat, but the ones that were actually cast are 69 to 23. So you Republicans may have the best of intentions there, but you're not actually voting. Sad for you. And then in Michigan, which is supposed to be very contested according to these polls, right? These polls that I just like, whatever. I'm glad she's up in them, but I don't put any stock in it. Again, this is votes cast, not requested, or not saying I'm going to vote. These are actual votes cast in Michigan, mail-in and early in person. 57% of them were by registered Democrats. 34% were registered Republicans. It's a 23-point spread. In Pennsylvania, that was a 46-point spread in favor of the Democrats. I'm sorry, I'm just not that worried about it. I don't know. I'm not that worried about it. So I want everyone to get out there and vote. But a record high stock market, virtually non-existent inflation. The Republicans for Trump just aren't going to turn out like they will for the Democrats. I saw remember last week I talked about her getting out there, trying to get in front of groups of people she needs to get in front of. And we had this podcast, I think it's the second most widely listened podcast, at least among white women. She is so far outperforming Biden and Hillary Clinton and white women. It's not even close. It's ridiculous how much better she is doing among white women. And this is why. This is the other thing I keep talking about, that a lot of you Trump people, you Trump men, that this is a big deal. These women, they turn out, I'm telling you, for abortion access, for women's reproductive health, for rights over their body. I saw this firsthand. I've made no secret about myself being a pro-lifer. And I have interacted with pro-choice people for years. And I I didn't like it, but I saw firsthand the passion there. They turn out, they show up. They just do. And I'm sorry if you as a man don't see that or don't feel that or don't buy it. It's there. Look at 2022. All of the projections were upended. It was an historically great midterm election for a first term president. Things that have never happened before happened in that midterm. And that was in the midst of terrible economic performance and horrifically low approval ratings for Biden. These people still turned out. So at your peril, you can say it doesn't matter. It does. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but the majority of America are women, and the majority of them are white. And she's hugely outperforming Trump with white women voters. The other thing is, what is Trump doing to appeal to his base, his non-college educated white men? Well, at yesterday's event, okay, let's go back to what she's doing. She's okay. We'll get to Fox News in a minute. But I saw the clips of yesterday's town hall where he just ended the thing 30 minutes. The last 30 minutes were supposed to be a question and answer with him up on the stage standing there. And he just didn't do it. He just stood there just dancing, like he does. I can't imitate him. But he just stood there in his suit on the stage for 30 minutes, it said. 29 minutes. Not saying anything, just listening to the music. And then when a song would end, he'd go, play YMCA. And they'd play YMCA, and he'd start. And the people were baffled. They couldn't understand what was happening. And then 30 minutes of that, and it ended. What is Kamala Harris doing to win this thing? She's going on Fox News tomorrow. She's going on with Bret Baier, who is the least Trumpy of their actual, quote, journalists, the few that they have left. He will actually hold Trump to account occasionally, rarely, but occasionally. And I'm pretty sure he'll pronounce her name right. I don't know if he usually does. I wouldn't be surprised if he's one of the few that usually does. But I certainly expect that level of respect from him in a one-on-one interview tomorrow for everyone. She will get hard questions. Now, I do think, I don't know if it'll be tough but fair, but I do think it will be tough but fairer than it would be with most of their people. It's not like she's sitting down with Laura Ingraham or old Tucker Carlson or something. And she will hold her own, and she will convey what she feels like she needs to convey to his viewers, to Trump's people. And this is a rare opportunity. She's only had one other opportunity to get up there in a setting where she would be guaranteed to have his people watching her. And that was the debate against him. And she annihilated him. She wiped the floor with him. Her ratings shot through the roof when she did that. And I think that's going to happen again after tomorrow. People are going to hear from her for themselves. His people who don't ever hear from her directly, they only hear what Trump and Fox News hosts say about her, but they're not hearing from her directly. So you've got a record stock market. You've got non-existent inflation, booming jobs market. You've got Trump it's just not functional right now. And he hasn't been for weeks, and there's 3 weeks to go. You've got 21 days left in this thing to make your case to the American people. And you're up there for 30 minutes just telling them what song to play. And she's going into the lion's den here. So I don't know. You tell me. Who has this thing? Who's in a better position, I guess, is what I'm feeling good about. And I think you should too, if you want her to win. And that's about it. the reason I cracked my coldie today was as a shout out to Appalachia with the heart of Trump's base, and that they are actually changing the can. It says MTN. They're going to change it back to the word mountain, I guess. It's very exciting. It's not going to roll out until May. I just read this last week, I think. But as a Mountain Dew drinker, I do love that. So that's it for today, and we will talk again tomorrow.